We will discuss the impact of digitization on global societal and economic progress. And who better to discuss that than Her Excellency, Mrs. Dima Al-Yahya, Secretary General of the Digital Cooperation Organization, DCO. Your Excellency, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nadine. It's always great to be in this innovation atmosphere, and especially talking to you and always welcoming you here in Riyadh.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. We are gathered today to discuss fintech, which is relatively new, especially in our part of the world. Let us shed light first on the size of this sector, whether globally or here in our region.
Well, of course, Nadine, you know, looking at the fintech ecosystem, although it is a very young sector, let's say, but it's growing very rapidly. If we look at it today, it's contributing to more than $220 billion to the global economy. And that by itself is a huge growth. Looking into what is going to be and projected in 2032, we're looking at an increase to a $1 trillion that contributing to the global economy. If we look at also the market cap of also the listed or the traded fintech companies in the publicly listed market, we see that the fintechs collectively contribute to more than 1.5 trillion. Now that by itself is a huge also number that is doubled 4 years ago. If we look also from the number of fintech companies, 350 unicorns, fintech unicorns, with a collective valuation of more than $1.5 trillion as well. That is a huge growth to a relatively very young sector. When we look at Saudi Arabia specifically, it is a contributor to that economy and a very big player as well. When we look at the Vision 2030 and betting on digital economy being a source of diversifying the economy, fintech plays a big role in that, and it is a piece of that puzzle. So therefore, the investments that we see that the kingdom has established in the fintech ecosystem is really, we're seeing the fruits, as we say, from an increase from 89 startups or fintechs in 2022 to now we look at more than 200 fintechs in 2023. That's in 1 year. So we expect more growth as well, as the kingdom is looking to become an environment where not only to support innovation and local startups, but also to attract the big players in the market to stimulate that ecosystem. So it is young, but it's growing very fast.
Can we still consider it niche? Because today we are talking about the wide adoption of consumers for fintech solutions, whether here in KSA or globally. But in KSA, I have to say the level of readiness is very high, whether from an infrastructure perspective or the readiness of the people to adopt fintech solutions.
Yeah. Well, I think, honestly, looking at the fintech sector, I think it overgrew niche, considering the importance and the mass impact that the sector is providing, not economically, but also socially as well. So if we look at the adoption, we're looking at 4.5 billion people in the world, which is more than the half of the population, already are aware of fintech solutions and services online. And we look at a very big percentage, which is a 36% of that population already is now adopting fintech services, which is, and we're looking at unbanked or underbanked societies. So that by itself really shows that this niche sector is actually providing a new way of how are we managing our money, how are we dealing with our financials, not from a personal perspective, but also from businesses as well. So therefore, looking at this sector and how it enabled doing business, how it enabled also the prosperity and efficiency of people's lives, we see that motivation in growth and in prosperity in that sector. So looking at Saudi specifically, if we want to put a lens on how Saudi looked at this sector from a very proactively manner and said, we want to see how can we expedite that growth in this sector by creating FinTech Saudi, which was established in 2018. And from that time till now, not only in supporting the ecosystems, but providing us a sandbox as well that enables innovation in terms of regulation and policy, not to suffocate the innovation, but also to prosper. So all of these factors, I think, gives us, or sheds the light that this sector is not niche anymore, and it became mainstream, rather than being the edgy and disruptive force. It became a mainstream right now.
Before we came on stage, we heard an announcement that the Saudi National Bank launched a platform for digital services called NEO. Let us talk about the traditional banking sector. To what extent is it a challenge is digitalization a challenge for traditional banking sector? And to what extent can FinTech be the answer to those challenges?
That's a great question, Nadine. And we're very proud and happy of the launch of the new digital services that SMB is launched today, which is NEO. We see a lot of other banks also going in that trend as well. Or I wouldn't say trend, but going into the same direction.
Yes.
Exactly. I see the biggest challenges that banks are suffering from a long time until now, which is, I would say, accessibility. Now, in many terms, you would see in terms of accessibility by serving unserved remote areas or underserved communities, and by using fintechs, it enables that reach and making sure that people, individuals, and also small businesses can have financial services, or either in terms of opening a bank account or having access to credit and loans and so on. Another accessibility as well, which is the audience and the consumers. If we look at DCO itself, we represent 800 million in population. 75% is under the age of 30. A very tech-savvy community. Now, that is a community or a consumer base that is very difficult to reach in traditional manners by, like us, going to physical banks before. They need a click of a button and a very easy access and inclusivity in services. So also that customer base needs a new way of thinking. And this is a big challenge for banks. And that's why they are now looking into a lot of banks we see are starting to establish investment firms or venture capitals that would invest in fintechs to help bridge that gap in terms of accessing those type of consumers.
Of course, with the widespread use of technology, also there is the higher risk of cyber crimes. So to what extent should regulators be aware of that and proactive in dealing with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very important factor that we really need to put an eye on. By providing any service online and moving to digital and online, that gets you more vulnerable and also open to more cyber crimes. Imagine, Nadine, that cyber crimes, they cost the global economy $10.5 trillion annually by 2025 if we don't look for solutions and start innovating. So here is where we really need to look at two really main matters in this case when we're looking at cybercrime. First is we have to be more agile and nimble in the way that we are regulating. So putting the right protections in place and working with the innovator proactively to understand the technology and to know exactly how can we protect that technology from a regulation perspective. And this is where we see Saudi Arabia being proactive in the agility and the maturity of the sandbox for fintechs. Another thing is we have to really increase the innovation when it comes to cybersecurity and provide the right platforms and environment for innovators in the field of cybersecurity to come up proactively with such protective solutions. We see the investment in cybersecurity on a global level reaching more than $200 billion, just investment in cybersecurity. That gives us an indication that, yes, it's risky, but not to scare us. We have to invest more in our safety as well.
I just want to point out that we have a session this afternoon dedicated to the issue of cybersecurity in the age of widespread use of fintech. We started the conversation by saying that we want to discuss the societal impact of fintech. You mentioned inclusivity, and this is a very important point. But today, how can we assess the impact of fintech on society? How can we measure the impact on society?
Well, such kind of questions are very dear to my heart. You know, as we're talking financially and economically, and we have already talked about how the contribution of fintechs to the global economy is very big and also very rapid in growth. We see today fintechs contributing to more than $175 billion to the revenue, the total global revenue of the banking sector. But we cannot neglect the social impact as well. By providing fintechs, we have enabled people to have more access to financial services, either in remote areas, either unbanked or underbanked communities, enabling small and medium businesses to do business, to get access to capital very quickly, and also to have more human-to-human reaction when it comes to financial services. Fintechs allowed a more inclusive, equitable, and also a sustainable ecosystem for individuals and smart and entrepreneurs as well. If I can give an example of some of our member states, I see an example in Pakistan, for instance. In Pakistan, in 2023, they were unfortunate to have a very unfortunate environmental collapse, which was the floods that happened and the rains that occurred in Pakistan, which affected more than 33 million people that lost their houses, their jobs, their lives also. And here we see a fintech called Easy Payza came in, provided that platform to create a safe environment for donations, where they collected donations from all over the world and enabled 30 humanitarian organizations to have access to donations and to funds. We look at, for instance, Nigeria, and I love that fintech, and I actually started mentoring them, looking at a problem that they had in terms of farmers. Farmers didn't have the right access to loans and capitals. Also, there was a lot of transactions between farmers together. And it was very difficult for them through the traditional banking services. So there's a platform called Thrive Agric, who created a platform for farmers to exchange goods with money, to sell, and to also open markets on more villages and more locations in Nigeria. For not only did they help in efficiency, transparency, and doing business, but also open markets. Another great example in Greece. And here we see a more use of new technologies like AI. So there is a startup called Plum, and it is an AI-powered money control application, which analyzes the spending behavior of the consumer, and then comes in with suggestions of how to save and actually stops spending for the customer.
Many people need that platform.
Exactly. So all of these examples give you a sense of how not only economically fintechs enabled, but it changes the mindsets of people on how to save, how to invest, how to be more safer actually in using also your financials online.
Let's go back to the business side of fintech. You started the conversation by talking about what Saudi Arabia is doing in this space. Now, you are representing the DCO, which has, as I understand, 16 member countries, right?
Exactly.
So Saudi Arabia is one of them. So from where you're sitting, how do you see what's happening in this space in Saudi Arabia, and how does it relate to the other member countries that your organization represents?
Well, a great question, Nadine. You know, looking at digital economy right now, it's growing very rapidly. If we look at 2023, it's 16% of the global GDP. Expected by WEF that it's going to increase to 70% where the contribution of digital services to the global GDP. That gives a huge opportunity for any country globally to harness that opportunity digital economy. But that's huge. That the infrastructure or that transformation journey for countries to transform is huge, from infrastructure to reforms in policies and regulations, to human capital development, reforms as well, and also attracting investment and outwards investment as well. No country can do that alone. And this is where it's very important to have that platform to share best practices, to bring people together and countries together to help one another. An advantage in one country could be a solution for another country. And here is where we see Saudi Arabia in the ecosystem of DCO being that player when it comes to fintech, providing that best practices, providing the best solutions to enable other countries to prosper and adapt financial services, either from a regulation perspective, either from an infrastructure perspective, or either from a system and solutions perspective. We have seen Saudi work with DCO to enable multiple fintechs to expand nations to the likes of Morocco, to the likes of Pakistan, Nigeria, and so on, and countries that need these solutions. Also, when we look at the sandbox, the fintech sandbox in Saudi Arabia, providing a state-of-the-art mechanism and a framework of how to work hands in hands with innovators to create the right regulation and policy. We have adapted such kind of regulation and trying to harness it and to harmonize that in other countries like the likes of Oman and the likes of Jordan and so on. So we do see Saudi as a player and a leader in the market when it comes to sharing these best practices, but also a good infrastructure and environment to attract the right also talents and the right fintechs to look at Saudi being the hub for them to do business.
I was very interested to see that the DCO, the organization which you represent, aims for digital prosperity. Yes. What do we mean by digital prosperity, and how do you achieve that?
Well, when we look at prosperity, and as I mentioned, digital economy is growing. How can we harness that opportunity? By digital economy, we can make lives better and businesses thrive. We believe in DCO that every individual and every country and every business should have a fair opportunity to prosper in the digital economy. So here is where we are serving our 16 member states from Asia, Europe, and Africa and the Middle East to really have a positive contribution to that digital economy and diversify their economies by betting on digital. Helping and supporting them have the right sustainable infrastructure and a very strong one to be self-sufficient as well. Enable more innovation and create a more efficient and inclusive business environment, not only to attract the right investments, but also to enable their companies to strive and to expand as well.
Do you rate them on digital prosperity levels?
Well, actually, we do. We have the digital economy navigator, and we're actually we give them targets and KPIs on where they should be heading to.
It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for being here with us and for this insightful conversation, Your Excellency, Mrs. Dima Al-Yahya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.